Hey, this is Brian with worshiptutorials.com. What you just heard was the output of the MESA CabClone, and I love this thing. This is one of my favorite pieces of guitar gear that I own personally. So what it does is it emulates the sound of a mic'd cabinet. So my Agape Tribute 18-watt amplifier here, which I love, these things are awesome, is running directly out into the CabClone. And what makes this unique is that it receives the load, which if you have a tube amplifier, you can't just plug it straight into a piece of gear unless it's designed to receive that load that it's sending out and the electrical load. So the CabClone will do it, and you will not damage your amp. There are a couple other products on the market that will do this as well. Palmer makes one, Two Notes makes one. They're both significantly more expensive than the CabClone. And then it gives you a few options so you can set your output level. I'm currently using the mic output, so I have it down at the mic level kind of area. And you can set your phase, you can set the ground or the lift. If you're getting kind of a hum, you can potentially get rid of it there. And then it emulates three different types of cabs. You have a closed back cab, you have a open cab, open back, and a vintage cabinet. I'm not exactly sure what specific cabinets MESA was going for on these, but they do give you three different sounds. So for this demo, well, I should show you too the outputs that you get. You have the input, which is what your output from your amp goes into the input. You have a through, so you can then run this to your cab. So basically, you would run your amp just like you normally would. Amp, whether it's a combo, it goes into the speaker output would be what you're running here, and then you could run this to your speaker. Or if you have a cab, you could just run this to your cab, and this just sits in the middle. You have a mic output, which is what I typically use. Obviously, I'm using it now. And then you can send this to whatever you want. So you can send it to, same with the line output, you can choose. Currently I'm sending it to my recording interface, and when I play live, I send it to just the mixer, just straight out of here. You also have a headphone output, which is very useful. It does not sound too bad. So pretty simple device, but very effective if you want to run direct using your amp. So for the purpose of this demo, the Agape has two outputs. So I'm running one of those outputs to the CabClone. I'm running another to a 112 cab with an Eminence Red Fang speaker in it. And the Eminence Red Fang is kind of like a clone of a Celestian Blue. So it's a great sounding speaker. I have that mic'd with a Shure SM57. So pretty basic setup. And I kind of played around with the placement and got it to where I thought it sounded best. But if you are running live, like in church or something, and you're running an amp, that's probably what you're going to be using, or something similar. So we're going to A/B them so you can hear one and the other. But first, let's just go through the CabClone. I'm going to take you through the different settings as far as the cab emulation. So I'm going to go closed back first. I'm just going to play some basic chords. This is my clean tone. This is an MJT thin line style Telecaster style guitar, and I'm running that into a Greer Amps Fish Press compressor. And then from there, currently I just have time factor for some quarter note delay and the Eventide space, and I'm on the tremolo verb setting, which I actually I'm not using tremolo. I like the reverb on it. And then we're going straight out into the Agape, which goes to the CabClone, and that is going to a Universal Audio Apollo interface. Sounds like this. This is the closed back option. Open back. Vintage. Okay, I personally prefer the vintage sound with this gear that I have. So we're just going to keep it on vintage the whole time. I'm going to play those same chords, and I'll put up on the screen what you're hearing. We're going to listen to the CabClone, and then we're going to listen to the mic'd cab, and it sounds like this. Okay, mic'd cab. All right, I'm gonna put on some Overdrive. This is a Tube Screamer style drive by Will Sledge Effects. This is called The Veil. I will switch to the bridge pickup, cab clone, and then mic'd cab. Now I'm gonna let this note kind of sustain a little bit so you can kind of hear how that works with both. So here we go. Okay, mic'd cab, here we go. Now, one thing you might have just heard a little bit is a little bit of feedback happening. With a mic'd cab, you're going to get that because the cab and the pickups, the volume is reacting, feeding back a little bit. You're not going to get near as much of that kind of thing with the cab clone, which may or may not be a good thing depending on what you want to do. Sometimes that can sound very cool, playing some rock music. But so that was Telecaster style. I want to show you what it sounds like with some humbuckers. So I have a Les Paul. All right, this is an Agile AL3001, and these are awesome guitars, by the way. If you're looking for like a budget Les Paul style guitar, they're in like the 3000 series is kind of in the $300 range, and I used to have an Epiphone Les Paul. This thing is way better in my opinion. Now I did swap the pickups out, so I have Porter pickups in this. I have Porter pickups in the MJT as well. I like Porter pickups, they're very good. Hand wound by Brian Porter himself. And this is the Smooth Classic set, and in my opinion, they sound great. When I run the Les Paul though, I do, usually this amp has a boost feature on it. I turn that off because these are higher output pickups, so clean kind of stays clean. And I actually like my clean tone just on the edge of having a little bit of hair on it. So if you hear that, that's why. But here's the clean sound, and we're gonna go MESA CabClone and then the mic'd cab. Middle pickup position. All right, mic'd cab, here we go. Okay, a little bit of drive, switch to that bridge pickup, and sounds like this through the cab clone. Lots of sustain. All right, mic'd cab. Okay, so you may be thinking to yourself, these are really boring, just chords. And when I watch demos, seems like you see one of two things out there. You see blues riffs, or you see metal. You see lots and lots of metal. But in my opinion, that's not very useful, especially for the kind of music that we like. So this demo is not really about my guitar playing ability. I really just want to demonstrate what this thing sounds like. But I will play something just a little more interesting for you. I'm going to switch back to the MJT. Okay, so we love our dotted eighth note delay in Worship Land, so I'm going to play a little bit of that, and then I'm going to loop it and play some chords on top of it so you can hear just a few different sounds. I'll probably do the like the rhythmic thing, just clean in the middle pickup position, then I'll switch to the bridge and put on a little drive just play some big chords over the top of it. And then we'll do it once through the CabClone and once through the mic to cab. You get the idea of how it sounds. So yeah, so here we go. All right, so that was the CabClone. Now, the beautiful thing about like the Ditto looper is it stores that loop. So I'm just going to turn it back on and play, and you're going to hear it through the mic to cab. All right, a few more sounds that I'd like to demonstrate. I do have a JHS Twin 12, which is a pretty cool overdrive. So I'm gonna play that and back on the bridge position and CabClone and then mic to cab. So here it is. Okay, mic to cab, same thing. So you definitely heard some feedback happening there with the Twin 12. That's a pretty cool overdrive distortion style pedal. So the next thing that I want to show you, the last thing, is some ambient swell kind of stuff. Now I am not like a ambient player, so this might be kind of a joke to some of you that are. But basically, in my opinion, when it comes to swells, you gotta have shimmer. So I'm gonna turn the shimmer on from the Eventide Space, which is an awesome sounding shimmer, by the way. And then just a lot of delay. And let's see, I'll just keep it clean and middle pickup position. And it sounds like this first through the cab. All right, and now through the cab, mic'd. Here we go. All right, so kind of my final thoughts on the CabClone. It's kind of an essential piece of gear for me personally. I do a lot of recording, you know, obviously I make a lot of these videos, so it really helps me get the sound of a great tube amp directly recorded. It's super easy. I love using it live because it's consistent. You know, most of us don't have professional sound audio engineers running sound for us, so something like the CabClone eliminates a lot of unnecessary steps, in my opinion, which those would be, you know, a live cab, miking that cab, running that back, messing with that, EQing, because usually you got to do a lot of EQ on a mic'd cab to get it sounding nice. So it's just, you know, I've played before back when I used a mic'd cab. One time the mic fell over, so tone was not good that day. This just makes life so much easier. You give the front of house guy a very consistent, a very good sounding signal every single time, and just eliminates a couple things that could fail on you and could sound potentially very bad on you too if they're not set right. So I love the CabClone. If you're thinking about picking one of these up, do note that they come in 4, 8, or 16 ohm ratings, so match that with the cab or with the amp that you have. Finally, I'll say this, like if you have an amp and a cabinet that you just love the way it sounds and you've got a great mic sound on it, I think that's probably going to be difficult for the CabClone to replicate that exactly. So in my experience, and what you've probably noticed on this demo is the mic'd cab sound has a sound and the CabClone has a sound, and they're not necessarily the same. I don't think they're necessarily one is better than the other either. So you're going to get a mic'd cab sound with the CabClone. It may not be exactly like the cab that you have, but it'll be a good mic'd cab sound, if that makes sense. Not necessarily better or worse, just maybe a little different. So that's one thing to note. It's going to react differently with your gear than it does with mine, but in my opinion, it gives you a very good mic'd cab sound and the ability to run it direct. A lot of people, when you run direct like this, a lot of people are concerned about losing this sense of air that you have with a mic'd cab. I don't know how bought into that I am, because you do have that. If you're sitting in a room with a cranked amp, it's an experience because there's pressure hitting you, like there's actual force hitting you from that, and I think that's where we experience that air a lot. And if you have that amp on stage with you, you get that, you hear that, you feel that. And yeah, there is a sense of three-dimensional space that you get with an amp, that if you're standing there in the room, that you do hear. But by the time, here's my opinion on it though, by the time that you put a mic in front of it, and usually you're putting like a $100 SM57 on it. Now, if you're dual micing it with like a Royer ribbon mic and a 57, and you're running that, and you run it into really high-end mic preamps, and you've got someone doing EQ on it and some compression on it, and they really know what they're doing, yeah, you're going to get a really, really good sound. But for most of us, what we have are an SM57 or something similar, and we're running that to like a Mackie board or a Behringer X32, which is what we have where I lead worship. And so you're running it into like a prosumer level, not a pro grade console. Even if you've got a really high-end mixer, you're still, it's not like it's not like you're running into an SSL board or something like that. And then you have potentially a volunteer, a novice, a sound person mixing it and running it, and then if you're running in your monitors, you're hearing all of that processed sound coming into your headphones. And I think the CabClone is going to be better in that situation. So it really just depends on what you want to use it for. But for sort of home, prosumer home recording kind of applications, I think it's awesome. For live applications where you're not just like, U2 on tour, I think it's great, and I think at the end you get better, more consistent results with something like the CabClone than you do miking a cab. You may disagree with me, and that's okay. And if you do, let's start a conversation about it in the comments. Finally, the last thing that I really think that you get out of something like a CabClone is you can practice late at night and not wake everybody up. So if you have a family asleep at your house, like I often do, because I'm a night owl, so and I want to play some guitar. Maybe I want to work on some parts for Sunday, or maybe I want to write some music or just play. I can run through all of this rig. I can crank this amp all the way up, and I can put headphones on through the CabClone, and all anyone in my family hears is, which is not a lot. So if you're a few rooms down, it's completely silent. So that is a huge benefit to having a CabClone as well. But what you hear in your head is just the full thing. It sounds like what you're going to hear coming out of the speakers if you're playing live or if you're recording. So in my opinion, the CabClone is a great piece of gear. I love it. I use it all the time. And thanks for checking this out. See you next time. Bye.